Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. We begin today with some timely reminders about pest management in winter crops. Joining us now is our extension entomologist, Tom Royer. And Tom, what are some of the first things that producers need to keep an eye out for this time of year?
I've been getting phone calls about a pest called winter grain mite, which is appropriate for this time of the year. And it seems to occur specifically in no-till fields. I've been getting calls over the last 2 or 3 years in no-till fields that are planted wheat, continuous wheat year after year. It's something fairly new. I've been here 17 years, and up until the last 3 or 4 years, I hadn't really gotten many calls on it.
So in terms of scouting for these mites, what do producers need to do? There's some time considerations.
There is some time considerations. Winter grain mites hate the sunlight. You might think of them as a vampire. But so on a cloudy day, they will be out feeding on the leaves, or another good time to scout for them is in the evening after the sun starts going down. Then they will crawl out and you'll easily be able to see them. We don't really have a good threshold for them, but if your wheat is starting to take on a grayish cast, and you see, hundreds of mites per square foot, that's probably an indication you need to do something to treat for them, because they can injure the wheat at that point in time.
And what do they look like? Up close, there's some colors that we have a fondness for here at Oklahoma State.
Absolutely. You need to have a magnifying glass because they're very tiny, but they have a black body with orange legs and an orange spot on their back. So the orange and black is very, theme specific to Oklahoma State. But there's something we don't necessarily want to celebrate.
Right, in our wheat fields.
In our wheat fields.
Let's talk about aphids and what we can look for in wheat and canola there.
Yes. From this point forward, as the wheat and the canola starts coming out of dormancy and starts growing, it's a prime time for aphids to become established in the springtime and sneak up on plants because they're still small, and then they can kind of overwhelm it. So it's really important to get out and scout for aphids in both wheat and canola.
And in terms of scouting, is there some tips there you can offer?
Well, if you're scouting for green bugs, we do have some high-tech things, but for the most part, it's getting out and just looking underneath the leaves and picking up leaves and looking to find if you have aphids on the plant, or getting down on the ground and slapping them to the ground so you can take a count.
And then in terms of army cutworms, we know the northwest part of the state is especially vulnerable, but it depends on the year, right?
Yes, it depends on the year. The moths fly down from the Rocky Mountains every fall and lay eggs, and so just depending on what that fall flight produces. But army cutworms are here from October all the way through March, and they love the cold weather. They will feed on canola and wheat, and I've heard farmers actually say it looked like my wheat or my canola just turned right back and dove back into the ground because they take out stands. So it's really important to regularly look and make sure your stand is not deteriorating or you're losing stand in those fields.
And is the best way to do that is just to check often, or
check often.
Look at those stands?
You need to look every week or every 2 weeks just to make sure you're not getting caught off guard with these things, because as those caterpillars get big, they start getting really hungry, and they can really take out a lot of stand as they get bigger.
And in terms of treatment options, it's going to be localized depending on what kind of pest problems we're going to see?
With each of these pests, they have a certain set of insecticides that are available to control them, and it's really important to look locally to find out what's your best price for the products and which products are best. So I recommend that you talk to your county county educator or check one of our fact sheets out for specific control information.
Okay, Tom Royer, our extension entomologist, great advice. Thank you very much. And for a link to those fact sheets that Tom mentioned, just go to sunup.okstate.edu.
Hi, I'm Al Sutherland with your Mesonet weather report. We have seen a number of wildfires this week from high winds combined with low humidities. Winter provides a perfect fire fuel source, standing dead grass. A graph from Minco is an example of how weather ingredients come together to give us conditions conducive to fires. On Sunday, the red graph showed air temperature going above 70 in the afternoon. Winds averaged above 20 miles per hour, the dark blue fill. Wind gusts peaked up close to 40 miles per hour, the light blue fill. The humidity Sunday afternoon dropped to 20% at Minco. Those weather conditions, along with the dry, dead grass, pushed burning indexes up over 100, the dark red map areas, by 3 p.m. Sunday afternoon. Almost the entire state was either orange or red that afternoon, indicating high fire danger. 12 hours later at 3 a.m. Monday morning, the burning index map showed a much lower fire risk across most of the state, the dark green, light green, and yellow colors. This is the time of year we need to take extra precautions not to spark any fires on windy days. Here's Gary with a look at our feeble precipitation as this year starts up.
Thanks, Alan. Good morning, everybody. It's great to be back on SUNUP. I've been off for a while, but as usual, I'm going to start out talking about drought because we are still in drought, even though we're in the winter months. And let's start off with looking at that latest U.S. Drought Monitor report. The newest map does show the spread of abnormally dry conditions, or D0. It's that yellow color on the map, further up into northeastern Oklahoma. Now we still have the extreme to exceptional drought down across southwestern Oklahoma. This area over to the northeast, though, that's a little bit different. Now it's not strictly drought conditions, but it's the precursor to drought. So it's definitely something to keep our eye on over the next couple of weeks to see if we get some rainfall, and we might actually have to reintroduce drought over into that area. We have had some exciting events with some snowfalls and some ice, but in general it's been dry. You can see that on this map of rainfall from the Oklahoma Mesonet for the last 90 days. Much of the I-44 corridor up to the northwest has received around 3 inches or less. And as you go farther to the northwest, it's even around an inch or less. So in general, we did have that frozen precipitation in November and December, but it's for the most of the state, it's actually been pretty dry. And you can see that in the next map with the presented normal map. The entire state we see below normal conditions for the last 90 days, from 20 to 60% of normal in the northwestern half of the state. A little bit better in Beaver County and a little bit better down in southeast Oklahoma. But in general, across the entire state, the last 90 days have been drier than normal. So to close, we really just need any type of precipitation in the state of Oklahoma, especially in the northwestern parts of the state and down in the southwest. Frozen, liquid, whatever it is, we'll take it. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
On the subject of weather, the winter season can present its share of challenges for agriculture, especially for those with livestock. Cold and icy conditions amount to just another day at the office for ranchers with hungry cattle. But delivering food is only one concern. Water presents its own set of challenges.
This has been a great year of understanding why it's such a problem to go out and chop ice every day, sometimes twice a day. We've had 2 big freeze-ups here before the first of the year, and a lot of people spend a lot of time chopping ice.
Still, it's important to address frozen water sources because cattle need more than you might think.
The rule of thumb that's easy to remember is about 1 gallon per 100 pounds of body weight in cows and calves, and that's cows that are dry or not lactating, gestating cows, up to about 2 gallons of water per 100 pounds of body weight if they are lactating. So obviously body weight is a big factor that influences their water requirements. And the other one is temperature. So the cooler it is, the less water they consume. The hotter it is, the more they need. The same goes with lactation. If they're not producing milk, their water needs are lower. If they give 10 or 20 pounds of milk, their water needs are intermediate. If it's a cow that may give 30 pounds of milk at peak lactation, they're going to be at the very high end, and it's a warm summer day, they're going to be closer to 2 gallons of water per 100 pounds of body weight. So real simply, a dry cow or a gestating cow on a cool day in the wintertime is going to consume about 12 gallons of water. Real hot day in the summer, a cow that's given 30 pounds of milk, she's going to consume closer to 24 gallons of water if she weighs 1,200 pounds. So just kind of a real simple way to gauge how much water cattle need.
If cattle are not getting enough water, how does that translate in terms of their forage needs?
Well, it's very closely associated with forage intake. And so, you know, if they're restricted for any reason, whether, you know, the pond is frozen over or the water line is broken or the electric fence is in the wrong place or electrifying the water and they just can't drink, the pond's gone dry. No matter what has happened, their forage consumption is going to go down, and the more it's restricted, the more it declines. And so you would expect their performance to go down if it's slightly restricted over a long period of time. If it's drastically restricted over a short period of time, you know, you're going to have health issues and dehydration and so on.
So obviously critically important. In terms of water sources and what options producers choose to set up, it depends on their operation and really where they are in the state.
Yeah, it's extremely variable, and you know, and you could, you know, they're low input, low cost systems to very expensive, more elaborate systems. And so yes, I think that's a good way to look at it. It's very much dependent on the area of the state, because in western Oklahoma, you know, you're primarily talking about a windmill and a large tank. In central Oklahoma here, we're talking about maybe a rural water source or a lake or a pond. In eastern Oklahoma, you've got about all the options where there's more surface water available, lakes, ponds, rural water, and so on.
Those with ponds have several options for maintaining access.
On a pond like this, where the cattle have access to the whole pond, one of the things you could do would be fence most of it out and then make an area that's, you could harden it up with some 3-inch rock or some other things and make just a single access point and make it a hard surface so that they don't have a problem getting in there. You could spend more money. This dam actually needs to be redone. You could go in and actually put a freeze-proof tank below the pond. That's a lot more work and a lot more expense.
The upside, however, is a much lower risk of cattle injury at the pond and no need to chop ice.
Normally these ponds, the drawdown on these freeze-proof tanks is probably 8 feet under the water in most ponds, so that water is going to be a little warmer, plus it's flowing through that tank and it will not freeze.
If you'd like to learn more, check out the link we've set up at sunup.okstate.edu.
With a very high price that we can receive for calves at weaning time, it's important that we try to save every calf that's born on our operation so that they make it to where we can actually collect that coupon perhaps next fall. As we go through this spring calving season, it's inevitable that we'll have some cow, perhaps a 2-year-old heifer, that has a little more trouble during the calving process. And the calf, as a result, is very sluggish, is slow to get to its feet, slow to find the teat and nurse that first time to get that all-important colostrum in its system. We need to understand that there's a biological process taking place in this baby calf that we call intestinal closure. Now, this is a change in the lining of the gut to where the calf becomes less and less able to absorb those very large proteins called immunoglobulins. That's the antibodies that's in the colostrum. And so over time, they lose that ability to absorb it. That's why it's so important that if we find that calf that's a little sluggish, perhaps went through a difficult birth, that we provide colostrum to that calf as soon as possible, certainly within the first 6 hours. A couple of things I think we want to keep in mind about this, and that is that we get enough colostrum in them. If we're feeding natural colostrum, it'll be about 2 quarts for an 80-pound calf, or a full dose of the commercial colostrum, the colostrum substitute that we purchase to put in those calves. The other point I think is that we need to remember is that if we feed another kind of milk, just say whole milk to that calf, that will speed up that intestinal closure process. So it's very important that we get the colostrum or the colostrum substitute into the calf first before we ever try to feed them whole milk to get those calves started. I would suggest that you feed the calf within the first 6 hours of life that 2 quarts of colostrum or the colostrum substitute, and then repeat the process 12 hours later before we ever try to feed the calf whole milk. If we can get them started that way, they'll get a lot more disease protection. We'll have a better chance of getting that calf healthy onto weaning time to where we can sell him and get that high price next fall. Keep that in mind, and I think it'll help your bottom line on your ranching operation. And we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
Several surprises after some major crop reports were released recently. Joining us now is Kim Anderson, our crop marketing specialist. And Kim, help us sort out the market reaction to the news.
Well, the market reaction to the corn and the wheat reports were surprise. The soybean report was just as expected. Initial reaction to the corn, the estimate of lower stocks, lower than expected stocks, both in storage and ending stocks, was higher corn prices. Wheat with the planted acres, lower planted acres in Oklahoma, 5%, lower planted acres in Kansas, 7%, higher planted acres in Colorado by about 600,000 acres. Surprise to the market, lower wheat prices. The initial response was as expected, but there were questions in the market about what we were talking about there.
And now that we've had some time to digest this a little bit, what's the sentiment in the market now?
Well, you look at wheat with the 5% lower Oklahoma and 7% lower Kansas. The question was, do we have less planted acres? And the general consensus was probably not. However, it depends on how USDA counted the last year's planted acres. Like for Oklahoma, it was 5.6 million last year and 5.3 million this year. But some analysts I talked to, their number was 5.3. That's what they expected. That's what they think's there, and that's what came. So it's how it was measured. You look at the corn on the lower stocks. I think the general consensus is right now, kind of between the lines, is that USDA may have overestimated how much corn will be fed in the residual, and that number may be off.
With this in mind, where do you think the market's going to go from here?
Well, the corn went up and came down a little bit. Wheat went down and came up a little bit. You know, they're both still digesting it. You look at the corn on the March contract, it's got support at around 417, and then at 406, resistance at 440. It's going to move around there the next couple of weeks. You look at the March contract for wheat, it's got support at 617, resistance at 630. So the analyst I talked to and my analysis says that we're just going to move sideways with wheat, still in a downtrend. Corn, possibly, you know, last week I said it had probably bottomed out. That's questions now. It could grind on lower. The basis is lower because farmers are, you know, with this report are selling their corn. They've been holding it. So I think just mostly sideways too, slightly lower for wheat, maybe slightly lower for corn.
And we want to wrap up with a bit of marketing advice for Oklahoma producers, those who still have wheat in storage. When should they sell it?
Start staggering it in the market, get it on in. If we break $6, it's Katie bar the door and it's going on down. And if looking at new crop, I probably wouldn't price any. You normally get a rally in April.
Okay, Kim Anderson, we'll see you next week. Thanks a lot.
Hi, welcome to Shop Stop. Today we got a tip about removing a bushing from a blind hole.
So you have a bushing, say it's on the flywheel of your vehicle or whatever that you can't get out, or you've got a bushing that's in a piece of equipment that you can't reach down and get out of. You can't get a puller down in there. So we're going to show you some ways that you can attempt, it doesn't always work, but you can attempt to get that bushing out of there. And so Randy's going to demonstrate some of those.
So one of them might be if you happen to have a tap that large, then you can just tap down into it and then possibly pull it out. Or maybe you might have some kind of device you can hook it with, if possible, and slide hammer it out. Maybe we might resort to cutting a slot in it. We'd take something down in and try to cut that slot down in there. And then once you've cut that, then you can kind of compress it and possibly get it out that way.
But maybe one of the easiest and quickest methods may be to fill this hole with grease, and then you take it, let's say you have another shaft that fits in there tight on the bushing, just as the other shaft did. Fill that up with grease.
How much you want in here? Enough.
A little more. That'll work. We'll get it going there. Then you stick that in there on top of the grease, and then you start hitting that with a hammer. And looky there, it's coming right up the top. It's popping that bushing right out of there. And it pushes your bushing out from that hole.
Basically the grease is incompressible and pushes it right back out. And it's a lot more fun than grinding on it.
That's right, and it's a lot less frustrating.
That's it this week on Shop Stop. We'll see you next week.
Finally today, with the window for top dressing wheat here, a heads up for producers using enriched strips. There may be some challenges this year because of the frigid temperatures we've seen recently. Here's SUNUP's Austin Moore to explain.
The enriched strip is a simple, elegant tool for identifying a nitrogen opportunity in wheat. Combined with Green Seeker technology, this strip offers producers a specific nitrogen recommendation for their field. But recent cold temperatures mean the current readings may be misleading.
We predict grain yield by looking at the biomass. How much green do we have out there? We're actually predicting biomass and taking from biomass to grain yield.
Which means leaf tips burned by sub-freezing temperatures indicate to the technology less green than is actually there.
There's two aspects of it. You one, hide the green. If the freeze damage is above on the top of the plant, so you hide the green below it. But another part, that yellow lowers the number. So bare soil, dead tissue, residue is about a 0.2 to 0.3 on the sensor. A full green, beautiful pasture of wheat or field of wheat will be about a 0.9 to 0.95. So you add dead tissue to that and it lowers the value that we see. It can't see enough green, so it sees it as background. The more non-green background we have, the lower the value and the lower the yield prediction.
Fortunately, there are ways to overcome this depending on how much damage you have.
If we have a slight freeze damage event like the field we're standing in right now with just a little bit of leaf tip, we don't mess with the yield prediction value necessarily, but we do need that wheat to recover. We need that dead tissue to slough off, allow a week or two of regrowth, get some good growing conditions, and then that's when we need to go out and sense.
More intense freeze events require a different approach.
There's one fix that we have when we have an extreme freeze damage event, when we've lost a significant amount of tissue and there's just, the field is nothing but yellow. And we do this very similarly to how we've handled dual purpose wheat. The fix actually came from producers. They found this to work. So we'll go into that sensor-based nitrogen rate calculator where we put in planting dates. We're going to move the planting date between 7 to 14 days after our original date. So let's say the original planting date was September 1st. We have significant freeze damage. I'm going to want to move that date to September 8th or September 15th, depending on where we need to increase that. The larger the wheat or the more the damage, the more days we need to compensate for. When you're gauging that, you have to go back to sound agronomic practices. Look at the environmental conditions you've had, the stand that you're currently looking at, the yield region of the area. You know, I'm looking at a wheat crop. I have a fairly decent idea that it should fall within a 45, 50 bushel range on a given field. If the sensor's predicting 38 bushel, and I know agronomically it should be at 45, I want to adjust that planting date to get to that level that fits.
This works because while the progress of the crop is important, the real key is the difference between the enriched strip and the rest of the field.
As we raise that enriched strip value from, let's say, 35 bushel to 45 bushel, the farmer's practice value is raising from 25 bushel to 35 bushel. Okay. So the difference does not just grow and grow, it still stays that responsiveness.
Of course, Arnall reminds us not to fuss with the numbers, just to get results we like.
I'm not recommending to any case where if you just don't like the yield recommendation to change a planting date, because that's not right. We have very good accuracy in yield prediction until we have biomass loss, large biomass loss, which occurs in dual purpose wheat and major freeze events.
First hollow stem is still a ways off, so for most Oklahoma producers, there is time to let the wheat recover before sensing. For SUNUP, I'm Austin Moore.
That'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can find us anytime at sunup.okstate.edu. You can also follow us on YouTube and social media. I'm Lyndall Stout. Have a great week, everyone, and we'll see you next time at SUNUP.